Welcome to Uncredible. My name is Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. Today we're going to take a look at some of the things that happened last week. I actually didn't expect episode 00 as it came out to actually work. A lot of the tech that I'm dealing with is 10 years old, so I kind of expected some of it to fail. You probably noticed that there was some grainy video switchbacks. To do a dual camera, I had to use a Sony VHS player. It's like a high 8 Sony. And so what I did was I just filmed that and then extracted all the information from that. And I'm glad I did that because I probably would not have released episode 0 if the video recording from that hadn't kept going. My Pixel 5, which was doing the main feed, actually failed about 38 minutes into that episode. So if you notice that at the end of that, there's like, I don't know, it was like 5-7 minutes of just raw Sony VHS video. That's why. So what we've done today is we've upgraded both cameras. I went to a GoPro over here, and we've got the Pixel 10 over here now. So, or I'm sorry, Pixel 9. What am I talking about? So it was an Uncredible episode. That was the plan. And we talked a little bit about the Winter Warrior half marathon. Had a good time talking about that. And so what I'm going to do today is we're going to try to build a little bit of structure into these podcast episodes. And what I think I'm going to do, and we'll stick to this loosely, is I'll give you a little bit of a background on how my last week of training went. We're going to release episodes hopefully once a week is the plan. And I'll tell you how my training's going, struggles, challenges, anything that popped up on social media, anything that's kind of rolling around in my head. And then we'll have like a main topic. And for example, today's main topic is just the foundation of what does it mean to be uncredible? What does that word mean? Because technically this is episode 1, even though episode 0 did come out, it worked. That was more of like a technology test than anything. So what we're going to do today is we're going to really start to establish the foundation of what uncredible means and why I'm passionate about it. But first of all, let's get into how my week's going. I'm in week 2 of Buffalo Marathon training. So it's going pretty good. Right now, because I have 20 weeks between the half marathon that I just completed and the Buffalo Marathon, I laid out the training block in such a way that I have built in 2 weeks of rest. Now, I am running. If you follow me on social media, you've seen some of those running videos. I had a 6.8 mile run in the snow yesterday. We got a ton of snow. I earned another frozen beard award. Froze my beard right up. But I'm trying to run every other day. Now, if you've been following me for very long on socials, you know that I run pretty much every day. Last June was my biggest month in terms of mileage, and I ran 200 miles. So right now, I'm right around 20 miles. Last week I had 17. This week I'll probably have a little over 20, depending on how it plays out. But so far, since the half marathon, I'd say I'm a little bit sore, mostly on my right side, but actually right now this morning, I'm feeling pretty good. Today is one of those days where I would want to go out and run, and I probably shouldn't. I had that last Saturday, and I think that's why I had so much soreness going into this week, so of like the second week of rest, so to speak, or light training. I felt really good last Saturday. It was 1 week out from the half marathon, and I decided to go as fast as I could. It was a beautiful day. The weather was good, and I got out there, and I think I ran 9-minute, 30-second miles. Really overdid myself. I really need to be right now in the 10 to 11 range. But once you get out there and you start to warm up and your body is telling you you're good to go, you want to go. You want to run fast. So I'm really trying to temper that a little bit. So as of, I would say yesterday, my legs were really sore, mostly in the quads and hamstrings. But right now, as I'm sitting here actually doing this episode, I feel pretty good. Today's a rest day. That's why I record. Today's Friday. And then I'll publish this on Saturday when I will do my long run. So right now, feeling pretty good. The weather here is starting to get pretty cold. I think we're going to have some of the coldest weather that we've had this winter. Either Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Somewhere in there, we're going to start to get into the below 10 Fahrenheit temperatures. And I don't think this winter I've run in those conditions. Back like 6 years ago when I was trying to lose weight and I walked through the winter, I did get that low in the temperature range, but since I've been running, I've never gotten that to that level. So the weather is starting to get cold. I've been doing some light lifting, stretching, trying to get the muscles stronger. I know that in my first marathon, I struggled at the very end with hamstring tightness, quad tightness. It was a real problem. It actually ended up costing me probably 40 to 50 minutes of time because I was running good, and then around mile 15, 16, 17, 18, I just had to walk. And I walked probably, conservatively, probably 6 miles. So of the 26. Now, I was able to get my wind back and loosen things up for the last couple miles and kind of like slowly jog to the finish. But I was really hoping for a 4.5 hour marathon in my first marathon. And all those leg muscle pains, I couldn't do it. So trying to work on that. I'm going to try to be consistent with the lifting throughout this training and really carve out some days for aggressive stretching and focusing on the adductors, the glutes, and lifting's not my passion, and certainly not lifting legs, so I'm really trying to make that a focus this time around. So that's how the last week went. Saturday, Sunday, we'll finish up week 2, and then we're going to start getting into the meat of the early training block for the Buffalo Marathon. I think I mentioned last week I'm training for a 3 hour and 55 marathon. I fully expect I won't hit that number, but that's what I'm shooting for. I'm going to train in that direction. And that way, if I miss, I'll probably be in the 4 hour 20 range, and I'm happy with that. My first marathon was 5 hours and 2 minutes. So if there's some leeway there, if something starts to hurt, I can walk and still feel good about myself. I fully expect that I will not be over 5 hours. I'm almost hesitant to even say that, but I felt really good for the full 13 miles of the half marathon, and that was in the cold, so I'm hoping the weather difference will help me out there too. Okay, so let's get into our main topic of discussion today, and basically I want to establish what it means to be uncredible. The foundation of this podcast, the foundation of my Substack, which is at uncredible.me, all of this has this foundation of uncredible. What do I mean by that? Well, when I was going through college, the expectation was that you would write a lot of research papers. And I did that. I wrote a lot of research papers. And one of the things that was really frustrating at that time was they really wanted you to physically go to the library, pull out a book, open it up, write down on an index card a quote or all the reference material, and it was a very tedious process. And this was at a time when the internet was pretty popular outside of academia, but inside of academia, it was like they were hesitant to accept it, and so there were different rules around what was a credible source. So you were constantly trying to find credible sources, and at that time, you couldn't use like a blog or like Wikipedia. I don't know that still today you can use Wikipedia, but what qualified as a credible source was somebody in the professional world, like somebody who, I'm not really sure how to explain it other than somebody who you would never have personally met, or somebody who had died 300 years ago, or somebody who wrote in a journal. You had to have some sort of like professional source to write these papers and to prove your arguments and all that stuff. Well, what I found was after I got my bachelor's degree, acquired my master's degree, and then I started to get out into the real world and work alongside regular people, they didn't care about any of that. And the truth is, I didn't really care about it either, but in order to check these boxes to get this degree, I had to identify what the collegiate level called credible. And the more and more I dealt with real people, the less valid those credible sources, the less credible they became to me, because those people who were writing those journals and doing that sort of academic work, it's very important work, but they didn't relate to the people who were standing in a factory working all day, or somebody who was in an office cubicle for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That would not be like if you were a credible person in my research paper, the people that were on the front lines of doing everyday work, they wouldn't care. It didn't mean anything to them. So what I started to find was that my credible sources weren't credible in the real world. And the other thing I found was that the reverse was true. So here I am with a master's degree and this collegiate level of, you could, like, I could put a resume down that would look really great. But then when I got into the workforce, people didn't care. It's like, oh, you have a master's degree? Okay, so now you have to start all over. And so in order to become credible to them, they didn't care about these sources or these papers or this document that I had that said I had completed college. None of that mattered to them. A lot of them didn't have these college degrees. So when I was in that field, no longer what I had kind of taught myself was credible, that didn't become credible anymore. It didn't matter to those people. So I had to establish a new system of credibility to prove myself, so to speak, to these people in the real world. And what I found was that what was credible, I'm trying to think of a good way, the currency, so to speak, in the real world was hard work, consistency, and reliability, right? So, and you could probably relate to this in the sense that, like, if you hire somebody or if you get a new coworker, the things you're looking for, like when they walk in the door, you don't walk up to them and go, so what's your degree in? You don't really care about that. That's not something that's important to you. What you want to know is, are you going to be here every single day to help me, or are you going to call off this Friday because you want to hang out with your friends, and am I going to have to carry your workload? And so what people in the real world were looking for were people who were committed to consistently delivering hard work on a regular basis. We wanted to be able to rely on those people. Now, I could deliver those expectations, but I still had to prove myself. And it became very striking to me that people didn't care about the amount of work that I had put into my master's degree or my collegiate level work. What really mattered to them in the real world was hard work and reliability. And it was kind of weird because I began to see this massive dichotomy between, like, the person that I could cite in a research paper. That person meant nothing to these other people who were in the workforce, and vice versa, right? So they would kind of look down on each other if they ever met each other. Like, neither one of them would care about their skill set because it didn't connect for them. And so what do you call it when somebody is, by all accounts, in the workforce, the hardest working, most reliable, never missed a day in 40 years, never been late in 40 years, but doesn't have a degree? In my research paper, I can't cite that person as credible. If that person had a blog or a podcast back then, they still wouldn't be considered a credible source. My professor would mark that off as I need another source. I'd have to go find a credible source. So, but these people, right? So these people that I was interacting with, from my perspective, became the credible people, because as I was looking at them, I'm going, these are the ones who are succeeding in life. They're the ones who are taking care of their communities. They're the ones who are taking care of their families. They're the ones who are putting in the hard work. Now, these people that I had cited in my research papers, those people were probably great people. I just never knew them. And I had a hunch that if they were trying to prove themselves to be credible to the people that I was working with in the factories and in the offices, that those people wouldn't cut it in those real world situations. And I say real world because, to me, these people that were in these books, whether they were long dead or they had written a journal, I never met them. I never got to work side by side with those people and see them show up day in and day out for their work. I didn't know who they were. And what I really learned over the course of, like, the last 20 years is a lot of the people in those circles, without getting too specific, whether it was professors or educators, and I got to be careful here because I'm not talking about like public school teachers or anything like that. I came from a religious circle, so like I had studied it for ministry, and I have a master's degree in ministry, and so those circles, I started to find that a lot of those people that I interacted with in my experience, they couldn't cut it in the real world. They couldn't go to a factory and work 12-hour shifts for 13 days in a row. That wasn't within their scope. And then the more I interacted with these people, the more I realized that I'm not even sure how credible they were even in their own circles. It kind of seemed like a lot of the people who had gotten up to the higher levels had found their way there through academic achievement, which there's nothing wrong with, but then it stopped. And so they acquired these accolades and then built from there. And, you know, they might be good public speakers, and there's a place for that. Or they might have written a couple good books along the way. But really, the more I interacted with those people, I was like, they never struck me as real. And so then I started to kind of aspire to be like the people that I saw in everyday life. The factory worker who's been there for 40 years. I started to really appreciate that guy, not so much because he showed up to what some people might call a dead-end job, but the fact that he did that and other things. And it was those and other things that they were accomplishing along the side. It might be something as simple as raising a family. Or in certain cases, it could be running a marathon. Or, you know, maybe they do something with a nonprofit organization outside of their everyday job. And the more I thought about this, the more I realized that the people who were in both professional worlds, like nonprofit organizations and things like that, but also in what I call the real world, but actually hands-on work-related jobs, those were the people that I respected. Those were the people that seemed credible to me, but again, they're not credible, right? By academic standards, they're not credible. So what do you call somebody who works day in and day out, supports his family, takes care of the people around him, supports his community, but also does amazing things on the side? Like if you were to walk past him in Walmart, you would say, oh, that's just a regular guy. But behind the scenes, he's doing amazing things. He's doing incredible things. Well, that's where I came up with this word, uncredible. And I kind of wear it as a badge of honor. And what I found was, the reason I came up with it first for myself is because it didn't seem to matter which arena I put myself in. Both of them would look at me and they would downplay the other aspect of my achievement. So if I was in a factory and, you know, I was working alongside people, they would look at me and go, oh, you have a degree, but can you show up every day for a year? You know, or if I was in the academic world, I would say, oh, I can work 12-hour shifts, and they'd be like, okay, cool. Can you write a research paper? Those two things were sort of like at odds with each other, and I found within myself that I was capable, at least on an average level, of doing both, and neither one of those were considered credible by either person, and so, or by either sector, I guess you would say. And so I started to kind of call myself uncredible in my own mind. Like I did start using this in a podcast back in 2014. It was a religious podcast where I was like, you know what? Even back then, I was like, I don't want to interview people who are cited in theological books or who have risen to the level of like national news. I want the regular people. I want the people who you've never heard of. Those are the people that I'm impressed with. Those are the people that I find the most fascinating, people like me. And the more I've thought about this and the whole foundation of this podcast and like I said, the Substack and some of the readings that I put up on Spotify, the whole foundation is built on this idea that average people aren't average. That the people you see that are showing up to work every day, that are reliable, hardworking, they're probably doing things outside of their normal everyday life that would be considered normal that are pretty extraordinary. And the more I interact with people, the more I find that is actually the majority of people. And those people that we consider credible, you know, the the athletes, the authors, the entertainers, the movie theater actors, and all these people who do all these things in Hollywood and the tech sector, they're the minority. The majority of people are uncredible. And if you were to ask those people who have made it, so to speak, they wouldn't register in their mind as being anything other than uncredible, right? They don't look to that person and go, "Wow, they're amazing." No, they're in their own sphere, and that sphere is small. What's large is all these people that I see, for example, at a marathon who have trained and exercised and worked alongside doing their jobs every single day and doing these great athletic feats that nobody's ever heard of. And you probably never will hear of them. Those are the people that fascinate me. And that's kind of the whole foundation of this idea of uncredible. And so you're going to hear me say things in this podcast and in some of the articles that I'm writing. You're going to hear me say things like average people doing not so average things, right? It's every one of us doing things that we wouldn't expect the average person to do. And hopefully the stories that you hear, the things that I share that I'm doing will be motivation and encouragement for you that maybe the goal isn't to become the next great actor or my kids have been watching Top Chef shows. Maybe that's not the goal. Maybe the goal is to just be incredible where you're at, or should I say uncredible. Be amazing at the world you're in your small community. And I think the world needs a lot more of that. I think we need to appreciate the people around us more and maybe spend a little bit less time giving our attention and our accolades to people we've never even met, people who couldn't stand beside us in our jobs and do what we do. Those are the people that are fascinating, and those people are you and me. We are uncredible. Now, one other thing I want to do with this podcast is I want to highlight uncredible people. Now, one way I can do that is by doing interviews. Now, a couple of people reached out to me after episode 0 and asked me if I was going to do interviews. Listen, the answer to that question is yes. That's the goal. In fact, the whole heart of the Uncredible idea was this was actually a segment back in the day in one of my older podcasts where I was trying to interview uncredible people. Now, that was specifically in a religious sector, and I was trying to give a platform for people, and so it was like a 10-minute segment. What I'll probably end up doing is special episodes that feature people that I find uncredible. But another way that I can do that, because right now technologically listen, let me just level with you for a minute. I'm using my personal cell phone for this camera, I think it's a GoPro 7 for this camera, which I got like 4 or 5 years ago for my daughter. She doesn't use it anymore, so here we are. I've got a Sony VHS camera sitting behind me. I've got a Blue Snowball microphone that I had 10 years ago. This laptop, I don't know if that's on camera or not, but this laptop that I'm using to record the audio for this and to do all the video editing, this thing is, I think it was 2016 I bought it. The hard drive was updated in like 2019 because it failed. It's not even able to handle Windows 11 at this point. So I'm running Linux Mint on this thing. So that's one of the reasons why I didn't think episode 0 was going to get out. But after doing some video compression and audio syncing and all this stuff, I was actually able to get it to work and pretty seamlessly. So all that to say this, I'm not sure if the tech right now can handle interviews like a streaming interview. I do have plans to have microphones right now to do possibly interviews behind me. You see the chairs behind me. I'm hoping to bring maybe some actual physical people in and do like real interviews, but I got to test the tech on that. So before I get that far, I want to make sure that I'm not going to have, I don't want to do a whole interview for like an hour and have the technology side of it fail. I don't want the camera to stop recording or the audio to blip out and then we're jumping around. So as I mentioned last week, my goal is to have the least amount of editing as possible. I just want to cruise through this stuff and then post it and maybe cut out a few things where I had to walk away or hit the record button. So yes, the answer is yes. I am going to be doing Uncredible interviews. I already have two people who've reached out to me to do that. But the other way that I can, in the meantime, elevate what I consider to be uncredible people is by doing what I call a podcast feature. Now, I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and in the vein of Uncredible, I'm trying to focus less on the big name podcasts like your Joe Rogans and whatever, Tucker Carlson, things like that. Your big name, I'm just trying to think off the cuff, Theo Von, whatever. Those big podcasts that you might be listening to, I want to kind of get away from that. I'll probably still listen to some of that stuff to just stay up on the news, but I want to start engaging with some of the podcasts that I encounter on Substack. People on Instagram have their own personal podcasts. People who don't get to be seen as much, people like me, right? I want to give them that platform. I want to give them that loudspeaker, and I think my hunch is, and I could be wrong, my hunch is that if those of us who would be considered uncredible, if we kind of start sharing each other's work and listening to each other's work and encouraging one another, I think we're bigger in the sense that we are more influential and we relate to more people than the people who are getting millions and millions of views. Now, the reality is trying to turn that into a loudspeaker where a lot of people will find it, it's a challenge. But all we can do is try. So, along with the weekly update that I'm going to keep doing and the main topic, whatever that is, today it was Uncredible, I want to feature a podcast that I listened to that you probably haven't heard of. And so for our podcast feature this week, I want to feature Craig Lewis's Running Tales. Now, you can find this on Spotify if you search for Running Tales. And on Substack, he has his information @ Running Tales. So his name comes up as Craig Lewis as the name, but his actual tag, if you will, is Running Tales. So, and if you go to his Substack, you can subscribe for free to get updates from him. He has a YouTube channel as well, which I'm going to show a clip of the episode for this particular feature. But he's doing kind of something similar that I am in the running space, where he's interviewing just amazing people in the running world, but not like the big names, not like somebody you saw break the marathon record, not that type of person. Somebody who's done just absolutely amazing things that you've probably never heard of. And so what I want to do today, I only listened to one episode and I was hooked on it. And I've asked him for permission to share this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the audio right now. I'm going to keep the cameras rolling. So right now, one of two things is going to happen. This is either going to switch to a clip of I think this is his most recent episode of Steve Cushing. Now, when that transition happens, I'll let the video play and then I'll come back and share some thoughts. Hopefully in this space is the clip and then I'll come back and talk about it. But this episode is an interview with a guy named Steve Cushing. And this guy is a 75-year-old ultra runner. And when I saw that headline, I immediately jumped on it because the person that inspired me to get into running more, or actually doing competitive running the way that I am now, marathons, half marathons, he was 67, and I thought, or 66, going on 67, and I thought that was impressive. This guy, when you hear the clip that I'm going to share with you, he's done some pretty amazing things. He's fought through some injuries, and so I'm going to play the clip. I'll come back and I'll share what stood out to me from that clip.
It was brilliant. I mean, the first problem was we got to Punta Arenas. We were in Chile, and we were waiting to fly into Antarctica. And we flew in an Aleutian jet, the sort of plane you see when food aid is taken out to third world countries. And we were due to land on a 1 mile strip of blue ice. So that's pretty treacherous sort of landing, and
Yeah.
some incredible pilots. But they had to wait for the weather conditions to be right before we could take off. I had something like 23 weather checks over a 3-day period waiting to go in. So you can imagine the anxiety and the pressure. It was just mounting and mounting.
Mm.
You'll have a weather check at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock comes, no, it's not safe to fly. We'll tell you again at 1 o'clock, and you were just waiting. But eventually we got there, and at about 11 o'clock at night, I stepped out of that plane and I stepped onto this 1 mile strip of blue ice, and it was broad daylight.
Yeah.
And it was the most amazing experience. And I just stood there and looked around and thought, if Shackleton or Oates or anybody had been in this spot all those years ago, it would have looked just the same as it looks now. Nothing
Yeah.
had changed. It was just they had this beautiful, almost like a cobblestone runway, just at all the ice. And then the next morning we set off at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, several layers of clothing, as you can imagine. And we were just running on this strip of ice. It was a beautiful day for the first 15, 20 miles. We were running between some mountain ranges. And then we turned at 20 miles back at the base camp, and we had a 6 mile loop to finish off. And the wind got up and we were having 50 mile per hour winds. So on the way back, the last 3 miles, I was not only running on ice and snow when the temperature was, with the wind chill factor about -20, but I was running into a 50 mile per hour wind. And I looked, and you could see just massive distances in every direction. And
Mm.
whichever way I looked, I couldn't see anybody else or anything else at all. It was just me and this huge expanse, and it was great. And just struggled my way over those last few miles, and eventually there was the base camp, and it was done.
So that's just a short clip of him talking about running in the Antarctic. I think he said, I don't know about the stats on this. I didn't fact check it, but I think he says in the episode that he's one of 9 people who've done a marathon in the Antarctic. And his story about running on that sheet of ice, which, you kind of got a glimpse of it there. It just was exciting to me because I've been doing this winter running. I've committed to running through the winter. I've been doing my Winter Beast Challenge on Strava, and I could really just appreciate his description of what he was seeing, and I could almost see it in my mind as he was telling that story, and I'm thinking to myself, the challenge that it is for me to run in the winter, I can only imagine at his age how challenging that is and how difficult it is. And he's actually working towards doing another run. Off the top of my head, I can't remember if it's a marathon or an ultra, but I mean, just incredible distances at his age. Just absolutely fits the idea of Uncredible. Here's a regular guy who's doing absolutely amazing things. And if you look at Craig Lewis's podcast, it fits the bill too. I would rather people be listening to those stories and getting motivation and encouragement from that than, spending their time, doom scrolling on Instagram. But seeing that everyday people can do this, to me, it's an encouragement. Listening to that, it's like I ran a half marathon in 22-degree weather. I hear that story and I see what's possible. And then at my age, right, he's 75. I don't know how old he was when he did that particular run, but you start to see that your body, your mind, you are more capable than you realize. And he's perfect. This Steve Cushing is a perfect example of that. So I'm looking forward to further episodes from him. If you're listening to this episode and you want to drop a comment and tell me, share a podcast that you want me to listen to, and maybe I'll review it on here as well. Just let me know. Also, if you're interested in being a guest on the show, once I figure that out, I'll have a list of people that I want to go through and interview. Preferably people who either have uncredible experiences, you're just an average person, where you do something that you think is out of the ordinary, or if you have a podcast or that you want me to share, like your own podcast, specifically in the running space, but I'm interested in everything. So shoot it my way. Diet, exercise, self-improvement, anything like that. I'm interested in it. I'll pull it up if it strikes me at the right time. On a lot of my runs, I find myself listening to podcasts in order to keep my pace slower. And right now, I'm trying to keep the pace slower. So that's our podcast feature. Again, that's Craig Lewis's Running Tales. I apologize. I think he has a co-host that I'm forgetting at the moment, but it's called Running Tales. You can find him. I think the easiest way to find him is on Substack at Running Tales. Now, I want to end each episode with a quote of the week. Now, I shared this last week. I don't know that it showed up, but let me get to the right quote. This is a calendar I got for Christmas. I'm kind of going through it daily. So there's that. Hopefully that shows up. But that's our quote for today. I'm reading these every day, and I'm picking one each week for the podcast. So today's quote is, "You trained for this." And I've been telling myself this. This was actually my personal theme for the week. I wrote it on my calendar here. Trust your training. And for me, what that means is trust the process and the plan that you put in place. Specifically in my case, and this might be a little counterintuitive, I need to let the rest happen. I love to get ahead of myself. One thing that I'm running into is I'm overdoing it sometimes. And I have to allow my body the chance to recover so that I can excel later on, so that I can have the energy and the capacity and the muscle strength to take that next leap in my process. What I tend to do is tell myself, you can do more, you can do more, you can do more. You can do more, but it does have a wear and tear on your body. And I'm recognizing that, and I'm trying to, in those moments where the calendar says to rest, I'm trying to listen to that and take it easy. Like today, I thought I had it on my list of things to do. I was going to hold it up. Today, for me, is a rest day. That's why I'm recording the podcast. I have time to do that. This is a day where I don't need to go out and run. And I'm already, believe it or not, I'm already telling myself to go do 2 more miles. And I'm having this constant battle where I need to trust my training. I have 20 weeks to train for this Buffalo Marathon. I can rest right now and I'm not losing anything, but I have to believe that. They could take another form as well. When you're in a race and you've done all your training, trust it. Trust where you've come from. Listen to your body. Listen to the thoughts that are in your head. You know, like I remember in the half marathon a couple weeks ago, I was around mile 6 and I was telling myself, well, in the first half marathon I started to fall off here. And then I kind of corrected myself and said, yeah, but that was your first half marathon. This is your second one. There's been 7 months since then. Trust your training. You can go further. You can go faster. And then I started to do a personal intake of where my body was at. And I was like, okay, does my hamstring hurt? Not really. I had a little pain in my glute at the time. Okay, is that causing me to hurt so bad that I can't run? No. Take a deep breath. Where's your cardio at? Spot on. Sweet. So when I did that personal intake, I was like, okay, my mind is telling me this is where we start to trail off. But when I take an honest assessment of where my body's at, I can keep going. And that's what you have to do. You have to trust and believe that the training you have put in will prove itself effective down the road, and you have to trust that training process. So if you have a training process that you're set to and you're committed to, you got to commit to it. And that means resting when it's time to rest. And listen, because of the rest, this is one of the reasons I don't like the rest. Because of the rest, I really didn't want to go out yesterday. It started snowing. Let me paint a picture for you. Wednesday this week was a rest day for me. Thursday was my 6-mile run. Wednesday, I wanted to go out, but it said rest on the calendar. Because it was 40 degrees out, I wanted to go out. The next day, which was Thursday, it was 12 degrees. I think it was 12 or 13 degrees. And I had to run 6 miles. And I really didn't want to. And it's funny how the day before, I wanted to take advantage of that good weather and run, but it was a rest day. And then when it was bad weather, I didn't want to run. And that's when I had to kind of change my mindset and say, listen, you've been saying this whole winter that you're a winter beast and you're a winter warrior. You got to get out there. And I'll tell you, when I started bundling up and going through my routine of putting the shoes on, putting the water vest on, doing all those things, I started to get in that zone. And I was like, oh yeah, here we go. So I felt good. It was a good run. But back to the quote, you have to trust your training. So you trained for this, whatever it is. It could be weightlifting. It could be academic, it could be whatever. It could be running. You've trained for this. You've put in the work. Think about the work you've put in. Think about the training and have trust in that training process and believe in yourself. Now, I want to close out with a couple of links. I'm going to try to get better at this, but who knows. Instagram. Instagram.com/Jeremy Lundmark or @Jeremy Lundmark if you're just in the app already. You can follow me on socials. I post my runs. Anytime I run or lift, I post a screenshot of that on Instagram. So if you want to follow me that closely, you can. Merchandise. I'm wearing an Uncredible t-shirt. I get 10% at redbubble.com. The easy way to find it is to just go to merch, merch.uncredible.com. That'll take you right to the current logos that I have. And I'm going to, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, try to get another design up there that is the logo of the podcast. Now, one other thing that you may not know about. On Spotify, you're going to run into 2 different streams for Uncredible. One is the Uncredible Podcast, which you're listening to right now. The other one is called Uncredible Readings. Now, what that is on Substack, which is uncredible.me, I write articles, and then I record the overlay, kind of like an audiobook. If you just want to listen to the articles and you don't want to read them or jump onto Substack and do all that stuff, you can just go on Spotify and follow that and just listen. They're like, I think they're about 5 to 8 minutes long. It's me just reading the article word for word. Don't get that confused with the podcast. They're going to compete a little bit, but it's just more content that you can follow. And there's currently quite a few articles on there because I was actually doing that before I did this. So if you want to get more content, that's how you're going to do that. So that's on Spotify. If you search for Uncredible, you should find me that way. I'm not sure what'll pop up. I will say that the easiest way to get to the podcast portion of it is to just put, I'm going to label the podcast episodes with numbers. So it'll be 01, 02, and so forth. The Uncredible readings have titles, so you'll be able to tell the difference that way. What else can I share? I think that's about it. Oh, the YouTube channel. YouTube, it's Jeremy Lundmark, JeremyLundmark. So follow me on the socials, click the links, check things out, and listen, we're all uncredible, remain uncredible, and keep doing uncredible things.